Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June Zoom and in-person citrus workshop. Thank you for joining us. First, I would like to thank Alison Walton from this IFAS Center for her help and cooperation. Today's program offers 1 CEU for pesticide license renewal and 1 CEU for certified crop advisors. If you are on Zoom and need CEUs, email me your name, email address, and license number. The program sponsor is Tim Martel with TRC Partners LLC. He is paying for your lunch if you are attending in person. Today's program will focus on improving weed management in citrus during midsummer, practical tips and strategies. Our guest speaker is Dr. Ramdas Kanissery, Assistant Professor in Weed Science at the UF-IFAS Southwest Florida Research and Education Center in Immokalee. Before giving the mic to Ramdas, I will have some comments and recommendations related to weeds. The definition of a weed is any plant growing where it is not wanted. In general, weeds reduce crop yield and increase production cost. Weeds may harbor insect pests, mites, and plant diseases. Weeds compete with trees, particularly young trees, for water, nutrients, space, and even light in the case of climbing vines. The more competitive the weeds, the more adversely they alter tree physiology, growth, fruit yield, and quality. Mowing before seed head formation is necessary to reduce seed dissemination and reinfestation. Weeds also have various effects on tree performance, including reduced efficacy of low-volume irrigation systems and interception of soil-applied pesticides and fertilizers. Be careful about frequent cultivations. Frequent cultivations result in the destruction of citrus fibrous roots, which normally would grow in the undisturbed part of the soil. Herbicide band. The herbicide band is too wide. It's a waste of money, time, and herbicide, and increasing soil erosion. Several herbicides, including glyphosate, have reduced effectiveness when mixed in hard water. This antagonism or problem can be overcome by adding ammonium sulfate to the tank mix. The use of the same herbicide over and over again can result in pesticide resistance. The most effective means to prevent or delay herbicide resistance is to rotate herbicides with different mode of action. Poor weed control can be expected from post-emergence application to weeds under stress conditions due to poor uptake and translocation of applied herbicides. Calibration, which is the process of measuring and adjusting equipment performance, is very important. Again, our guest speaker is Dr. Ramdas Kanissery, Assistant Professor in Weed Science at the UF-IFAS Southwest Florida Research and Education Center in Immokalee. Dr. Kanissery's presentation will provide tips for developing the best strategy based on observations from trial and experiments to minimize weeds in citrus groves from midsummer through fall. It's all yours, Dr. Kanissery.
Good morning. Thank you for attending in person as well as joining through the Zoom. Thank you, Mongi, for the introduction and giving a basic information on the weeds. Thank you, Tim Mattel, for sponsoring the event, the lunch and everything. So my name is Ramdas Kanissery. I'm a weed scientist here at the station. So what I'm going to do today is to give an overview of some tips and strategies and some approaches we can utilize with a focus on summer, midsummer, like what we are having right now, all the way through early fall, which is a very important timeline when we think about weed management in citrus. So these are some of the themes I'm going to touch base with. I'm going to talk about effective herbicide use, the ways to improve them. Improving tree safety, it's very important. Whatever we do, we should not hurt our trees, especially we should not add the stress to the already stressed trees, right? Then there's a lot of hope and enthusiasm out there for new planting, resetting. So I'm going to touch base with a little bit of weed management approaches in new planting care. Raw middles, very important when it comes to citrus weed management. It's not just the under tree or under canopy, like Mongi mentioned. We have to make sure the raw middle areas is also managed. And I will summarize it. So let's talk about the effective herbicide use. Okay. So the first thing when I moved to Florida is this endless summer. You know, you see all the vehicle tag plates says endless summer. Welcome to South Florida. So I moved from a almost like a very tropical state. I mean, in India, the southwest part of India, to Florida, which is pretty much like the same weather, the same weeds, same vegetation, everything is same. So summer, we all like summer. Similarly, weeds also like summer, right? I'll tell you how. So if you look at the historical rainfall in Southwest Florida, look, this is for 10 years or so, you can see the most of the rainfall is focused in the midsummer. For example, June, July, and August. That's where you get, over the years, you get the most rainfall. So what's going to happen in all this rainfall? Definitely there is going to be a lot of nutrient leaching and things like that. But from a weed management point of view, a lot of soil moisture from this rainfall with a plenty of sunlight, intermittent sunlight we are going to get in midsummer is a perfect recipe for weed emergence. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of weeds. We see, basically, when we think about our studies shows that when you look at grasses and broadleaves, summer is the time for broadleaves. You see a lot of familiar broadleaves such as Spanish needles, cutleaf evening primrose. I'm going to show some examples. It's going to come up a lot from the soil, under the trees. Once in a while, you see new weeds as well. So I always tell, in Florida, as a weed scientist, there is no dull day in your life because you see a lot of new things coming up. There is severe weather events like storms and hurricanes, and you see new weeds. For example, Pennsylvania cudweed. I don't know what it's doing in Florida because it should be in Pennsylvania. But again, our soil has all these weed seeds lying there, waiting for the right opportunity. So you can see familiar weeds or new weeds and things like that in citrus production. So timely control is very important, especially when you have to control it before they go to maturity and seedling stage, right? Another thing we have to focus because of in summer is, I don't know if you know about this critical weed-free period. That is for any crop, there is a critical weed-free period, meaning you have to make sure there is no weed competition during that time in their growth stage or in their production cycle to reduce. That's the time when there is more competition. For example, in citrus, from our studies, we found that it's usually occurs from the bloom period to early fruit set. And in many varieties, like Valencias, for example, this happens during the summer period, meaning that's the time we have to make sure all the efforts should be concentrated to manage weed in the summer period, because that's kind of a critical weed-free period. I didn't mean that you should not make it weedy during the other part of the or other time of the growth cycle, the production cycle as well. But it's really helps when you manage the weeds during these summer months, because that's kind of in line with the critical weed-free period for most citrus varieties. So we found if you make sure if your weed management efforts are focused in that time, you can definitely gonna see that in the production. For example, look at the data here. If you have average harvest weight on the y-axis and x-axis, 2 levels of weed control in summer. For example, if it's 10% weed control, which is weedy, and more than 75% weed control, you're going to get at least 25% increase in the yield. And it's not that difficult to achieve this 75% of weed control during summer in citrus. With this background in mind, I'm going to give you some tips and strategies how we can achieve that 75% or more of weed control. So that's going to reflect in your yield, right? So we have a whole suite of post-emergence herbicide, meaning they're herbicide utilized for controlling the already emerged weeds, right? So these are some groups of non-selective herbicides. So I'm not going to go into detail, but we have an excellent production book out there, Citrus Handbook, which has a weeds chapter, which has several tables on different types of herbicides, post-emergence, pre-emergence, selective, non-selective. So these are some of the non-selective herbicides, meaning they can control both broadleaves, grasses, and sedges, no matter what, they are non-selective. And there are some new products. Some of the products are out of the market. For example, Landmaster was a good product we had, but it's not available in the market. But we have new products such as Sunphosphate, based on glyphosate, which Mr. Myrtle will be talking about that after my talk. It's a new product. It's a water dispersible granule, and he will give more insights into that. But my point is, we have a whole suite of different non-selective herbicides. Then selective herbicides, sometimes we may have to use species-specific or a group-specific herbicides. For example, if it's broadleaf weeds, we may have to use saflofinacil or Trevix. 2,4-D is a new chemistry we got registered or approved to use in citrus recently. Then if it's grasses, on the other hand, we have some couple of products like fluacifop or cethoxrim. So there are several options in the toolbox. I'm terming this as a weed control toolbox because you have several tools in the toolbox. You may have to pick more than one tools or integrate more than one tools to get the best out of it, right? So one issue I've always noticed when it comes to weed management, not only in summer, anytime, is the compatibility issues. Always growers ask me what to mix or what not to mix in the tank, right? So as I mentioned, glyphosate is a great product, but when you may have to add it with some other active ingredients, especially 2,4-D, to get a better broad spectrum of activity. But always when you have this mixture going on, as you can see here, there is mixing incompatibility, and you might get the filter plugged in and things like that. So one tip based on our trials we observed is, if you're mixing glyphosate and 2,4-D, save the glyphosate towards the end, because dilution is the key here. If you add glyphosate and 2,4-D product together, there may be some reaction, physical and chemical reaction happening, and it's going to clog a lot of things. So rather than that, mix everything except glyphosate. And when the tank is almost 90% full, add your glyphosate product and then fill the tank and do the agitation and things like that. So this always works and reduce a lot of incompatibility issues. Then again, the same thing, glyphosate, you mix with 2,4-D, right? So I found that this mixture always works when you have a less grass pressure. As you can see here, we did a study and looked at the grasses, and you look at grasses, but when you have a high grass pressure like here, and when you mix glyphosate and 2,4-D together, it may not work very well in the grasses. So my tip to you here, if you have a higher grass pressure, do not mix this or use this mix. Either use glyphosate alone or use a specific grass killer, as I mentioned in my earlier slide. But if you have a higher broadleaf pressure and a little bit of grasses, this works very well, the glyphosate and 2,4-D mix. Similarly, when it comes to mixing, what to mix and what not to mix, it's a great question. We always have in our mind while in the farm or the field. Some fusilade, which is a grass killer, should not be mixed with 2,4-D. Doesn't get a synergistic effect, rather it's going to be an antagonistic effect. Similarly, glyphosate and carfentrazone. So carfentrazone is a a kind of a contact type herbicide, meaning it's not gonna kill the tissues that comes in contact with it. But if you have glyphosate, it's a systemic herbicide, meaning it has to move through the tissues all the way from the application site to the root. So if you have a carpenter zone, it just kills the tissues and restrict the movement of glyphosate into the weed. And you don't get, again, an additive or a positive effect there, a good outcome there. You're getting kind of putting money in the drain here. Similarly, glyphosate and glufosinate. So basically, glyphosate or any systemic herbicide should not be mixed with a contact herbicide such as glufosinate or carbendazole. So keep this in mind when you plan your summer programs or any time, herbicide programs. So another thing, always stick to a higher herbicide rate if you have a mature weed in a mature growth stage. Look at the pictures here. You have an untreated control. This is a goat weed. It's a problematic weed in many parts of Southwest Florida. And when it gets matures, it has a very, very tough skin as well as very sturdy growth. So most herbicide would not touch it. For example, if you use paraquat, at 1 pint per acre, if you skim on the rates, see, it's just as green as an untreated control in the bottom. But if you have a higher rate, like just 3 pint per acre, again, we have to adhere to the labeled product rate, maximum rate, but make sure if you have a weed which is like a couple of feet high in a very vigorous growth stage, make sure you use the maximum allowed labeled rate. If you skim on the rate, it's not going to work. And surfactant, I always show this picture. This is a picture we took on a cabbage leaf. So, cabbage is one of those leaves with the most waxy layer in the plant group. So whatever liquid you add onto the cabbage, it's not going to stay there. It's going to run off because it's really waxy. But surfactants, when you mix it with surfactant, it can stay there. So I have a UV light based photo here. You can see even on the cabbage leaf with proper surfactants, you can have the sprays, herbicide sprays sticking on this. Similarly, for citrus weeds also, we have to make sure we mix the herbicides with surfactants. For example, SWFREC is a very popular product we use for managing Spanish needles and other broadleaf weeds. Never mix SWFREC with a non-ionic surfactant. It will not work very well. In fact, it's going to reduce the activity of SWFREC. So we have to make sure it's mixed with methylated seed oil. It's a group of surfactant. It's widely available, and you can purchase it and to mix with SWFREC. You get the best out of it. Especially grass killers, another example, you get the best with crop oil concentrate. So the grasses, if you think about, if you have a idea of grasses, if you look at their leaves, it's a lot of hairs on it. So meaning you need something very strong to penetrate that cuticular and hairy and wax layer to get into the grasses. So for this, crop oil concentrates always helps. Similarly, pH. Mongi already talked a little bit about this. You have to make sure your spray mix is in an optimal pH level. For example, 4 to 6 in our studies, we found that's the best pH to get the best out of your herbicide program. Many herbicides, I have a table here which clearly shows the stability of many herbicide products in different pH level. For example, some of these products like cetoxidin, which is a grass killer, never mind. I mean, they don't care what the pH is. That's going to work in most of the pH levels. But when it comes to paraquat, pH above 7, it's going to disintegrate. 2,4-D, it's also going to disintegrate in pH 7 plus pH. Glyphosate is very notorious for this. I mean, if you have a pH more than 6, glyphosate starts to disintegrate and you may not get the best out of your application program, the best outcome. So make sure your pH is less than 7, at least 4 to 6, when you use the glyphosate-based products. And in many of our farms and grows, we have hard water issue. So the pH, because of the salt content in that, the pH is going to be more than 7. So we have to make sure you have a buffer such as AMS or some kind of Quest or some buffer that's available in the market to make sure your water is conditioned or buffered to get that optimal pH 4 to 6, right? So another question, it's the summer, we have got a lot of sunlight and things like that. So what is the best time to apply a post-emergence herbicide? Whether it is early morning, late evening, things like that. So we did a study here. If you look at, this is a pigweed, okay? We have a control. You can see the pigweed, the growth. So we sprayed glufosinate, which is a popular product again, at night, 10 p.m. And we sprayed the same set of weeds at 1 p.m. just after lunch. So look at the difference. So that means most of this herbicide has to be applied sometime in the midday because there is a lot of sunlight. Sunlight makes weeds happy. They will be active and they will suck up a lot of herbicides that's applied onto them. So if you ask me what's the best time to apply a herbicide, I would say when the sun is up. If you plan to apply it in a late evening or very, very early morning when there is no sun, you might not get the best, especially for herbicides like glyphosate, glufosinate, most of the systemic herbicide, they work well when the sun is up, such as after lunch here. It doesn't mean you have to wait until lunch. I mean, if the sun is up at 10 p.m., if you have plenty of sunlight, you can go ahead and apply your herbicide. So I want to just demonstrate that here. And then rain, see, this is the midsummer means a lot of rainfall. So, it's gonna impact a lot of our production activities, including herbicide sprays. So we might think, okay, between two rains, if you get a time, let's run and spray some herbicides. No, it's not gonna work. So we have to think about a term here, rain fast period. It's a minimum time that we should give a product to stay on the weed foliage before it rains. It's known as the dry period or rain fast period. And it depends on the product that we use. For example, I put together a table here based on the hours that we have to give when we apply herbicides in a rainy weather or rainy period. So most of the herbicides, within 6 hours. So if you see a 6-hour dry period, you can apply them. Some of the herbicides such as 2,4-D or Embed Extra might need a little bit more time. So I would say a 12 hours to 24 hours window rain-free period is there, then plan your herbicide applications. Another thing, when you spray herbicides in rainy weather is the wind. In most cases, before rain, wind is gonna pick up a lot. So you have to make sure whatever you're applying is not prone to any drift and things like that. So rainy weather, herbicide application is a whole big things, a lot of things, a lot of approaches we need to keep in period, but at least make sure you give at least a 12 to 24 hours of window, a rain-free window, to make sure your herbicide product stays on the leaves, retains on the leaves, especially as to get dried and get absorbed into the foliage. Otherwise, it's again putting money in the drain. So I have more information on this topic in the last week's tip of the week in citrus industry, herbicide application during rainy weather, if you're interested for getting more information on that. Now, rain is there, and another aspect is plenty of sunlight, and what's gonna happen? Heat. We already had a brunt of that a few weeks ago, 95 degrees, right? No, should not apply herbicide when it's 95 degrees. It's gonna be going not going in the right direction, it will be going the other direction. For example, glyphosate, 2,4-D, sethoxydim, all the systemic herbicides, they will not work when you have a heat stress weeds. For example, look at this picture. You can see we had applied glyphosate. And maybe a couple of days after, when we looked at it, you can still see the green color there. It didn't touch it because the weeds are stressed. At 95 degrees, more than that, weeds do not want to grow. So you just apply your herbicide, it's not gonna take up by the weeds. So make sure if the temperature get cooled down a little bit, it's less than 95, maybe 90 degrees, then you plan your program. And also at this temperature, there is a high chance of herbicide getting blown up into the trees and cause some injuries and damages and things like that. So again, like rain, high temperatures, like 95 plus degrees, is not conducive for herbicide programs. So I always tell this, when you have a herbicide program planned for summer, and it's a good 3 to 4 months, 3 to 5 months, right? Through early fall. So we may have to do follow-up applications. So make sure you don't use the same herbicide over and over. Do not use glyphosate as a follow-up. If you have a glyphosate, follow it up with glufosinate. Then follow with the garfentrazone. The idea is to make sure the weeds are not adapted to your herbicide application. So weeds are very smart, actually. They can outcompete the crop, and they think differently. So if you have the same mode of action or same chemistry applying, they will find a mechanism to cope up with that and have tolerance easily. We are seeing a lot of tolerance issues. I'm going to touch base with that soon. So make sure there is a herbicide rotation, especially in the summer months. Okay. So, when you think about the post-emergent herbicides, those are herbicides programs we are going to do when the weeds are emerged. Make sure you have an AM surfactant. Use the spray volume, do not use a higher volume such as 50 gallons per acre or very low volume such as 10 gallons per acre. Something around 30 gallons per acre is it's an optimal volume when you plan your program. Good spray coverage, especially for contact-up herbicides, and spray when there is ample light and less wind. And make sure the weeds are in a growing, non-stressed stage, and you will get a very effective weed control here. So as a weed scientist, the only good weed is a dead weed for me. So now switch my gears to another scenario here. See, so as Mongi mentioned, we like to keep a bandwidth under the trees, right? So we like to keep it really clean because that's where all the competition comes from. And we like to keep a little bit of vegetation in the row middle. So the same, I'm showing a pic photo of an under tree area, which was very well maintained. And the same spot I pictured in about 30 days. See, there's coming, all the types of weeds are coming there because remember this number. So research suggests that each square foot of soil with 6 inches deep has about 3,000 viable weed seeds. It can be translated to about 1.3 millions of seeds in an acre. And these seeds, some of the seeds, it could be broadleaf, sedges, or grasses, that can live up to 20 years. So we have a very rich seed bank in our soil, waiting for the right opportunity to come up from the soil. So whatever you are doing or efforts that you're doing, putting together in managing it, it's going to come up anyway. So we have to make sure in your summer program, it's the right time to put in a pre-emergence herbicides. I talked about post-emergence before. Now I'm going to talk about pre-emergence or residual herbicides. If we apply into the soil, stays in the soil, and make sure new weed seeds are not germinating because we have plenty of weed seeds in the soil. So again, we have a whole suite of pre-emergence herbicides. There are, again, consult our production book for the full list and things like that. We have a couple of new entries. For example, rimsulfuron and flazosulfuron are the new ones. We did some trials with them and it works. And some of them are being added to the production book as well. Flazosulfuron is an excellent product. We found that it has the capacity to reduce the emergence, and it might even help us, even some of the weeds escape from the soil, the flowering will be reduced as well. So, but the only catch here is it cannot be used in early growth stage citrus, can only be used in 5+ years old citrus, but a couple of more options. So again, my program is focusing on adding more tools to the toolbox, right? So the growers have more options. But my message to my growers here are, make sure at least one pre-emergence program or residual program has to be brought into the summer weed management. It helps a lot, and it helps in the upcoming seasons as well. Because if you have more weeds emerge, there is a risk of more weed seeds being added to the soil, right? And instead of using one pre-emergence, we are asking the growers to mix one or more pre-emergence with different mode of action. This helps because if you have more chemistries in the soil, if one weed seeds escape that chemistry, you have another chemistry in the soil that will take care of it. So we have tried several combinations, and these are some of the examples which are very successful, like flumioxazine and indaciflam. So the good thing with this tank mixing of pre-emergence, you can actually cut down the rates as well. So it's economical. At the same time, you get a broad spectrum of activity as well. So these are some of the examples: flumioxazine plus indaciflam, then flumi mixed with diuron, flumi with norflurazone, rimsulfuron, the new herbicide, mixed very well with indaciflam, and in all this way, you can reduce the rate and you can get both grasses and broadleaf prevention as well. So I want to show this source. So we have a great tool online, because when you're using multiple herbicide products, surfactants, and different other things, in the tank mix, you might be wondering what is the correct order to mix, because that's very important. You have to make sure the herbicides are mixed in the right order, and we have a tool online where you can put in, you can search for a different herbicide product, and it will tell you automatically what should be the order of your materials to mix in the tank to avoid mixability issues and things like that, right? So this is online. There is I think there's an app also available because this is a precision lab application. Another challenge, again, this also comes in this midsummer timing with a lot of rainfall. So this is a photo of a soil that I worked when I was in University of Illinois, when I was doing my PhD and postdoc. This is a picture of that soil from my farm there in Illinois. You can see typical crop production soil, which represent about 80% of the soils in United States, crop production soil. Very dark with a lot of organic matter and things like that. But this is the picture from our backyard. That's what we deal with here in citrus. Basically beach sand, less than 1% organic matter. This has a lot of implication when it comes to herbicide application, especially pre-emergence herbicide, the residual herbicides. See, so herbicides, when you apply to the soil, they are designed to stay in the soil, the 6 inches. Remember, hundreds and thousands of seeds there. And so they have to bind into the soil surface, maybe through, I don't want to go into details here, but sometimes it could be organic matter or clay and things like that. They have to stay there for some months to do its job. But in Florida, citrus, we don't have those binding sites. We don't have clay or very less clay. We don't have organic matter. So where are these herbicides going to stay? So unlike other production soils, this is a challenge we have, especially when it comes to weed suppression. You apply the herbicides, in a couple of weeks, it's going to leach out from the weed germination zone. So we did some work into that direction. We put some work efforts into that direction and see how we can have these active ingredients stay in the sandy soil. So we come up with, we screened several materials, several ideas, brainstormed things, and we found out that when you use a particular group of surfactants or additives, not surfactants, they are additives known as herbicide deposition agents, you can do this. For example, what that does is they increase the size of the spray droplets. As a result, these higher sized droplets cannot percolate or leach through the pore space in sand. And then they help or they prolong the interaction of these active ingredients with the sand and help it stays there for a longer time than we use without them. For example, we tried it with flumioxazine, a popular pre-emergence herbicides. You can see a small piece of data here. So you have the weed control on the y-axis, and the weeks after treatment, you see the untreated track. You see it went down, meaning the weeds came up very easily. Flumi did a great job for a few weeks and months, but then it started leaching out. But when we mixed Flumi with this adjuvant I was mentioning, there are some examples like Grounder or Hydrovond. We have some products out there. You can see that, again, these deposition agents helped the Flumi a little bit more, stay a little bit more time in that 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches where all the seeds are there. And we get an excellent, a couple of, or maybe 2 to 3 weeks extra time. So that means in the weed management world, if you get even 1 week of extra weed suppression window, that's golden. So this type of strategies always help. And it's not going to add a lot of, or increase a lot of production budget, because we're adding at about probably 0.1% volume per volume. It's not much. It's not going to, probably in this example, it's going to add only $1.50 or less than $2 per acre, but you're going to get more than 3 weeks or even up to 1 month of weed suppression in the long run, especially in the sandy soils. It works great in the sandy soils, but in the soils with a higher clay or organic matter, it may not be a big thing, but for us, this could really help to improve the retention of these active ingredients in the soil. So this is an example. We have flumioxazine plus adjuvant. Look at the under tree area, very clean. But if only untreated control or maybe flumioxazine only, you can see a little bit of weed growth coming into the tree rows and things like that. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown on some of the common summer weeds we see in citrus. A whole suite of weeds we see, like Spanish needle, ragweed, goatweed, grasses, dayflower, nutsedge. So broadleaf weeds, very, very problematic weeds are Spanish needle. For example, many growers are complaining, especially in summer, we found what's happening is the Spanish needle has this wonderful ability to put out extra cuticular layers when there is stress, especially heat. So in summer months, they put out these extra cuticular layers, and whatever herbicide you apply, it may not penetrate well into the Spanish needle. So generally, if you look at a year-long control, it's very difficult to control Spanish needles in the summer. And you see, even your 1 or 2 applications may not even touch them, especially with glyphosate or glufosinate and things like that. So, and one plant, if you let them grow, they're going to produce about 3,000 to 6,000 seeds in a season. And the research suggests about 15% of the seeds in the soil it's going to germinate in the next season as well. So Spanish needles in Florida, at least Southwest Florida, we call them annuals or seasonals, but their presence is perennial. You see them all the time, all the year round in Florida. So so it has a very poor response to glyphosate or 3 weeks. Even 3 weeks, we used to get a good control on Spanish needles, but these days we're seeing a lot of tolerance issues with 3 weeks as well, probably utilizing the same mode of action again and again. So one of the workaround strategy here is to rotate 3 weeks with a 240 or rotate 3 weeks with a 240 plus glyphosate mixture and use a follow-up spray in about 21 to 28 days. Then you should be able to control them and make sure you spray them when they are really young and use a pre-emergence herbicides. Similarly for Parthenium, ragweed Parthenium, see? So we applied glyphosate in the grow, and you see the grasses are all killed. But look at the Parthenium. It's as happy and healthy as before. Glyphosate did not touch them because they are pretty tolerant to products like glyphosate and even glufosinate at times. So again, the key here is to rotate. Don't use glyphosate again. You rotate it with a 3 weeks or 240, some broadleaf killer, and make sure you bring in a pre-emergence herbicides into the program. So these are some of the young growth stages of Parthenium. So when you see this in the grow, make sure you control them. At this stage, we call it like the 4-leaf stage. Just they get emerged. Make sure you apply the spray when Spanish needles or Parthenium are in their young growth stage. That's the only way you can control. You let them grow, it's a big ticking time bomb. Grasses, you have Bermuda grass, Guinea grass, and I'm not go into detail, but I will just want to make sure you know this, you have this information. So we have to use a specific grass killer such as fusilade or post for grasses, and AIM. Many growers would try to use AIM when you have a high grass pressure. It's not going to touch it. It's like putting money in the drain. AIM is a contact broadleaf killer. It's a selective broadleaf killer. It has a very little activity on grasses. So you may have come across this situation where you have a Guinea grass growing very close to citrus trees. So here we should be using a spot treatment with 1.5 to 2.25% solution of fusilade or post without having a contact with the tree. So that's the best management strategy. Otherwise, if you do a regular spray, it may not touch these grasses growing neck and neck with the trees. Dayflower, we have a lot of issues in Central Florida. So we did several trials and we found the best material to manage Dayflower is 240. Earlier it was Landmaster, but since it's not in the market now, you can either use a 240 or mix a 240 with a glyphosate product. It works very well. It's actually a monocot. It's more closer to a grass than a dicot, but it behaves like a dicot when it comes to the management practice. So 240 is the best option to manage Dayflower. Nutsedge, we all have this problem, especially in Southwest Florida, and nutsedge thrives a lot during the summer months because, again, the moisture plus sunlight. We see a lot of type of these nutsedges, yellow, purple, some annual sedges. And for them, again, you have to use a systemic herbicide such as glyphosate or glufosinate. Contact herbicides such as AIM or paraquat may only give you a top kill because nutsedge is a perennial and it produces a lot of tubers. It never germinates from a seed, very 0.1% or so. Most of its thriving is persistence is through the tubers. So one tip we found is, if you have to kill nutsedge, make sure you spray when they are really young. So nutsedge only put out the tubers after a couple of weeks of emergence. So that 2 to 3 week window, it would be like this. You don't see any tubers here, right? Just the roots. So this time, you put your spray and you can manage the nut surges. Once they start up putting out the tubers or rhizomes, the underground storage structures, it's pretty much invincible, actually. Another issue we see a lot in summer is the vine weeds. Basically, it can actually take out the whole tree, like here, milkweed vine or balsam apple. So I have seen growers trying to try to entangle them from the trees. It's not going to work because you know what? They have very, very thick roots, strong, sturdy roots in the soil. And it's going to come back from the roots again because they have underground storage structure. So one thing we have to, and if you try to spray it, it's not going to work either because you have the foliage on the citrus leaves or citrus, and you might end up injuring the trees as well. So one strategy we can use is, again, what did I tell you? Taking multiple tools from the toolbox. So first you have to cut the vines at like a few feet, leaving a stump. So you're basically cutting the food supply to the vines. So vines are going to dry out. So if you can take it out easily, then onto the stump, you apply a systemic herbicide. So it will go to the roots and kill the roots. So we call it integrated weed management strategy. We are mixing or combining a chemical application with a mechanical strategy. So this is a great example of taking multiple tools, especially for vine weeds, right? Now, let me give you a quick rundown on the tree safety, because summer is the time we do a lot of herbicide programs, ultimately ending up in a lot of injury issues. We are going to see injuries like this. This is an example from glyphosate spray going into the foliage, needle-shaped leaves here, and sometimes even pre-emergence herbicides such as Carmex. It's an example here. You see a lot of injury. Alien application injury. So what we have to do here is make sure when you apply, deliver the herbicide to the target by looking into small things such as right spray boom height and OZ nozzle height and things like ankle and things like that. You can control those, a lot of these damages. So OZ nozzle, this is something we always forget about. So it's a nozzle at the end of this boom, right? Boom has a nozzle at the end. We call it off-center nozzle. That actually very helpful because that nozzle helps you to control or put the spray in the other side of the tree row. But the angle is very important. Many times we forget this. But if you look at, this is a 0 angle and this is a 40 degree. For some reason, this thing is coming. Yeah. So 40 degree. So what happened, if you have a higher angle, this is going to happen. If you have a higher angle, you have a higher height of the spray. The spray is going to reach into your foliage. For example, if you have a 40 degree angle to your OZ nozzle, you're going to touch, what do you call that? You can touch the foliage. It's great. You have to have a little bit of angle, not 0, but something like 10 or 20, even up to 30. You can get the other side of the tree row. But if you have a 40 or plus degree, then you're going to touch the spray. It's going to touch your foliage, especially if you have fruits hanging from there. It's going to injure and you're going to get some fruit fall. Similarly, this is an interesting piece of data we put together. So this is the distance that spray droplets will travel. For example, there are different types of sprays, right? We can select our nozzles to make sure we have different sized spray, very fine spray all the way up to ultra coarse spray. So very fine sprays, less than 50 microns, can travel up to 1,000 feet. So it's very important. You have a very high pressure, smaller droplets coming out. You may not think it's going to go there, but 1,000 feet is a big distance. You may be applying in the raw middle, from the raw middle, but still it's going to go into your foliage, causing a lot of damage. So make sure you don't use a lot of the nozzles that's going to produce an ultra fine spray, and make sure we have some deposition agents and things like that, so that you have a medium or fine sprays rather than ultra fine sprays. Okay. Some of the examples are grounded and crosslock we can use if there is a chance of a wind, as well as reduce the drift and things like that. And then spray pressure is very important. So we ask the growers to stay in 20 to 30. So higher spray pressure means we're going to get a very smaller droplets, which is going to cause a lot of issues. So new planting. So there are a lot of new plantings happening right now, resetting. So make sure before the land preparation or during the land preparation before the planting, you should make sure a contact herbicide you use to control the weeds. And it's always wise to stay away from glyphosate until planting. But if you use glyphosate, make sure you have a good pre-plant interval, maybe 3+ weeks. And you may have seen this, but it's always good to use a protective trunk around the new planting. So this also helps in reducing the contact with herbicides. And we have a lot of IPCs going on. Make sure the bottom of the IPCs are tied up very well. Otherwise, even the sprays can get into the plant through the IPCs. But if you have it tied up in the bottom, you can reduce a lot of spray drift into the tree. And do not use a lower end of the rate, labeled rate in new plantings, at least for the first year of planting. And if you have to use a pre-emergence, I would suggest using norflurazone or solicam, which is a soft herbicide. And once the trees are established for more than 1 year, you can start using other pre-emergence and post-emergence program. So raw materials. So in my observation, 50% of the weed emergence in the tree rows, the source is from the raw materials. See, this is a very poorly managed raw materials. All the grasses comes there. There's seeds. There is no mowing happening. So the seeds are going to deposit it under the tree row. So we have to make sure we have a good management program in the raw materials. So that's going to go a long way, especially for under tree management. So mechanical mowing is a standard grower practice. Make sure they're mowed before they get seed, flowered and seed. And also frequent mowing actually increases the vigor of the grasses. So you mow, it's going to grow more, right? So one thing we can do here to interrupt that pattern is to use a chemical application in between the mowing. For example, we call it chemical mowing because you mow them, wait for 1 to 2 weeks, and apply a very low dosage of herbicides. Something we need to keep in mind, do not use the full dosage here. I have some dosage examples here. If you use the full dosage, you're not going to burn the whole vegetation. We have to make sure this dosage is to be followed. It's just a little enough to control their growth. So this way, we found you can increase the frequency of mowing. Rather, if you use only mowing, you have to mow it every other week. But with this type of glyphosate application between mowing, you can span out your mowing frequency to maybe 1 month, 1.5 months, which is very, very useful. Then cover crops, we do a lot of studies with cover crops these days. It's an emerging trend in citrus for raw material vegetation management. We worked with Dr. Strauss and Dr. Albrecht and Dr. Davy to look at several aspects of the cover crops. I'm mostly interested in suppressing the weed growth. So this is a video of how we planting cover crops using a seed drill. And in about a couple of weeks, you see some germinations there. So it's very important. We learned that the water, moisture content is very important. And getting rainfall during the late summer really helps if you want to try some cover crops out there. And this is a mixture of sun hemp, daikon radish, and ryegrass about 2 months after planting. You can see a lush growth and a lot of flowers that's going to attract good insects and pollinators and things like that. And from a weed management point of view in the raw materials, it's a great system. In all our studies, multi-year, multi-location studies, we are seeing an inverse correlation between the cover crops as well as weeds. So especially with planting, the more you plant, you get more benefits of the cover crops. As you can see here, when you compare to first planting, second planting, third planting, you get more and more benefits. So what does this mean? I mean, if you actually reduce the emergence of a weed, there is less seeds added to the soil. There is less enrichment of the seed bank, and there is going to be less weed pressure in the upcoming seasons, right? So cover crops is a great system, especially you may not see the effect in the first or second season, but you continuously don't lose hope. Do that a few years, and you're going to see some benefits, definitely. And this is a picture in the non-cover cropped area. You can see all type of nasty weeds, green guinea grass, black nightshade, geranium. But in the cover crop area, just our cover crop. And this is a great system for even controlling the raw materials in the under tree areas as well, because we did a study recently. We had cover crop And we used a herbicide under the tree, right? Row middle cover crop under tree. So we looked at several weed pressure, and we found that for Guinea grass, this is an example from Guinea grass, for cover crop system, there was we were able to control the Guinea grass like anything in the under tree area, but without cover crop, even with glufosinate and glyphosate, you can see here, the Guinea grass density was very high, meaning the cover crops in the row middles is actually reducing the pressure, Guinea grass pressure in the under tree area. So don't think that okay, it's just row middles, but we have to control, manage it. But the row middle management is the first step for the under tree management, right? So that's what I got. I think I'm in time here. So we talked about effective herbicide use, post-emergent sprays, definitely before flowering and seeding. We have to consider weather, not only summer, but all the year, but definitely in the midsummer, think about rainfall with a lot of sunlight, perfect recipe for the weed emergence. So this is the time we should act to manage weeds. Pre-emergence herbicide, very important, especially for breaking that seed bank. Tang mixing, pre-emergence, we talked about rather than using one product, tang mix them, rather than using one product, rotate them. And that will really help in managing a lot of tolerance. Tree safety, very important. Whatever we do, we have to make sure that we use best practices for herbicide application. We talked about the OZ-NOZ angle, the off-center nose angle and everything. Use, in new plantings and research, use a low herbicide rate if you can in the first year, then slowly switch the full rate when the trees get established. Row middle, we talked about rather than using a mowing, use a herbicide application, low rate, really help. And cover crops is an emerging practice, a great system. So I want to thank all my students, postdocs, and my technicians, biological scientists. They do all the hard work, and I'm here just to present. Just kidding. And thank you very much, all my collaborators, growers, cooperators, and we have a bunch of educational materials out there online as well. So I talked about the production book, great resource, has a lot of information. Then we also have some quick reference guides, if you can, throw it in your truck. It has all the information on the herbicides, their rates, considerations, and things like that. So thank you very much. And that's all I have. And I'll take questions if I have time. Otherwise, I'll hand over the mic to Tim. Yeah. I think I have some questions. I'll have time for questions. So first, I will see if I have any questions from the Zoom audience. Okay, so there is a question. With a wet winter that we had this year, what's the recommendation about the use of pre-emergence during fall? Is there any concern when to apply, thinking of root drop? No, actually, as I mentioned, pre-emergence herbicide always get benefited from a little bit of rainfall because it helps activate the pre-emergence in the soil because the active ingredient has to come to the soil solution. So a dry season is not a great season for pre-emergence, but wet season is always good. Yeah, fall is okay, early fall is okay, but I would say, and again, with pre-emergence, we did not, based on the studies we have done, we did not see anything related and any adverse effects on the fruit drop. So yeah, it's fine. Either you can use it in midsummer or early fall, that's fine. But make sure it gets activated through irrigation or a little bit of rainfall. I think there is, yeah, that's the only question I have from Zoom. Any more questions from Zoom? Looks like no. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I'll wait, or in the meantime, I will also see if we have any questions from the audience here in person. Yes. Sorry.
You mentioned something about like material used to prolong the
Yes. Yes.
Can be used with fertilizer material?
Yes. So Kamal's question was the absorption agent or the deposition agent I talked about. Could it be used with yes, with fertilizers? Yes, of course. Basically it has nothing to do with the herbicide. Maybe It might depend on what type of product and the chemical we are using. But I think in theory, you can use it with anything. I mean, basically what it does is it makes the spray droplet bigger and have the sprays, whether it is a herbicide spray or insecticide spray, any sprays, reduce its leaching possibilities in the soil, leaching potential in the soil. So it's worth trying, definitely. Yeah. That's it? Yes, yes, Gab.
I have a quick question on
Yeah.
like, how in a year,
Mhm.
like, do you have like, around how many, herbicide sprays are in a citrus production
Yeah.
over a year?
So the question was how many typical herbicide sprays are being done or have to be done in a citrus production? Yeah, I would say generally, if it's just a post-emergence herbicide, I'd give it 3 to 4 actually, depending on the weed pressure. But if you have a pre-emergence, that's why I said you can, if you bring in a pre-emergence program, you can actually reduce it to 2 post-emergence. So basically either 4 or even up to 5 post-emergence with follow-up sprays, or 1 pre-emergence and a couple of post-emergence. So you have an advantage there. If you have a pre-emergence, you can definitely cut down your post-emergence sprays. Yeah.
Any other question?
You have a question? You have a, no, sorry. I think that's it. Thank you very much. So let's have a good summer weed management program, you all. And I'll hand over the mic to Mr. Mike. Mr. Tim Martel. He's our lunch sponsor, and he has a new product, Sunphosphate.
Hi, my name is Tim Martel. I am with TRC Partners. And actually, this product is called Sunphosphate 75 WDG. That stands for water dispersible granule. And it's glyphosate, and it's preloaded. It means that it already has ammonium sulfate in it. So wanted to thank Mongi and Ramdas for having me today and the opportunity. I always like to get in front of growers and the people who are actually, in the field doing the work. But I just wanted to review some of the unique attributes of the Sunphosphate 75 because it is quite a bit different. So it's a dry formulation, which is a bit misleading. It's really an extruded granule, and we can pass this around in a few minutes. But this extruded granule is what you would pour, obviously, into your tank solution and to create your glyphosate mix. But 1 pound of this product, and there's 2 11-pound bags, and I can open this up. I got my knife with me. There's 2 11-pound bags in here. So it's pretty convenient. I would say one of the characteristics of the product, besides the fact that it's extruded granule instead of liquid, is the convenience of it. You have 2 11-pound bags are easy to handle. You're not dealing with jugs. I don't know if there's very many people that have dealt with 30-gallon drums in the past, or the 265-gallon totes. Those are heavy. They can be cumbersome. So we found a pretty good fit with this product. Actually, it's not a new product, Ramdas. It came on the market in about 2014, 2015. We introduced it with the former company I was with called Helm Agro, and it was called Helisate 75. So 5 years went by. We got some market penetration, but Helm actually got completely out of glyphosate. If you recall, back in 2019, there was a lot of legal issues, and still are to today, surrounding glyphosate with lawsuits. They're a family-owned German company, have a big fertilizer business, et cetera, but they just decided it was best for them to exit the glyphosate market in the US, where they felt like it was had a lot of litigation surrounding it. So I took the product over because I had already been selling it in the Southeast, and we now sell the product in Texas. We sell it in some other states. We sell a lot of it in Georgia with pecans. And if you're familiar with what burn down is, that's where a row crop farmer goes in on cotton land or peanut land, and they they spray every acre. So it's used for burn down. It's used in citrus quite a bit. We found a pretty good following here, and it's used in vegetable production down here a good bit. Coastal carries it if you're looking for a provider. But anyway, the product's a bit unique in the sense that instead of it being liquid, it's dry, has a lot of convenience. It is preloaded with ammonium sulfate, which is, helpful. Mongi talked about, hard water and that being an issue with your efficacy. We see that a lot. The salts actually antagonize with the glyphosate salt, and you get reduced efficacy. So having the AMS in there is nice because you put this in the tank and boom, you have some AMS in there right off the bat. You could probably reduce your AMS input if you're already using it if you're using 0.5% to the volume, you probably want to reduce it to 1/4, possibly save some money there. Cost, I know, is a big issue with all the duress that's going on in the citrus industry right now with greening and everything else, that hurricanes and all the things we're having to battle. But the cost is essentially the same, maybe a slight premium on this product, but a lot of that is given because of the efficacy. This product has really good efficacy. That can be attributed to, I think, two things. One, already having the AMS in it. The second being that it's a totally pure form of glyphosate. So when they make this product, it's made with a heat process, and that takes all the impurities out of it. So in my former job, I worked with a company, Helm, that I mentioned, and we actually manufactured or did what's called amination, where you take a dry technical material and turn it into liquid. Well, what happens in that process is there can be a lot of contaminants and impurities that get in liquid glyphosate, and some have more than others. So sometimes you may wonder why, wow, I got kind of reduced efficacy. It could be that, there was more contaminants in that particular batch. Well, with the Sunphosate 75, you don't need to worry about that because it's free of contaminants because of the heat process that's used to make it. So between the convenience, the efficacy, and the cost being essentially the same, we think it's a good fit. It's not a fit for every grower. If you're set up to with 265-gallon bulk tanks, you like that. That's kind of fits well for your operation. Maybe it's not a fit, but if you're using jugs or if you're using totes and you just don't like messing with totes anymore, take a look at this product. We stand behind it. We're a small company, but we're very involved in the markets that we serve, whether it be, citrus, pecans, row crops, etc. And I've sold this product now for about 10 years. Had one complaint in that 10-year period where a person, simply just was confused about the amount of product to use and didn't put enough product in the tank mix. It is labeled on virtually every crop, or it is labeled on all the same crops, that liquid glyphosate, whether it be Power Max or one of the generic brands, it is labeled on all of those crops as well. So there's no issue there. And as far as mixing compatibility goes, Robert has played with this product. I think Ramdas may have looked at it as well. It takes about 45 seconds to a minute for it to go into solution when you pour it into your spray tank. And that, of course, would be under agitation. And so that's not very long. And so there's no clay-based carrier here. There was a former Monsanto dry glyphosate product that was on the market about 20 years ago. It was a clay-based carrier, and there was problems with it clogging up the sprayer tips and things like that. So with this, it's going to go into solution. You're never going to see it again. There's nothing to settle out. So that's a big positive. Other than that, I talked about it dissolving quickly. We think it's much more convenient to use than the liquid glyphosate products. It's a pure form of glyphosate, easy, compact, packaging. I'll open this up for you guys here real quick.
Storage, shelf life.
It's kind of indefinite, really. I mean, hopefully we never have to, deal with that too much. Because it's getting used, right? But no, yeah, and so if you're in a cold weather climate, which is an issue, you know, like I say, can have problems with super cold weather, so. Kills all weeds.
Yeah.
Yes, it's just like, it would be, you know, somewhere than, but this is the 11-pound bag. You can see pretty easy to use and second knife, you know.
You need to go there.
I mean, if you want to show the zoom.
Oh, the zoom, yeah.
That's. Yeah, that's it.
Right here?
Yeah, right here you can see it.
Okay. So this is the, I forgot we were on Zoom, sorry about that. But this is the 11-pound bag and there's 2 of those in the case. But other than that, I can pass this around and you guys can, you know, take a look at it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me any questions you may have about the product. Like I said, we do have a pretty good following with it in citrus. We focused on citrus early on with the product. And we have some caretakers that use it. They really like the idea. We have different grove managers that like it. And so, you know, hopefully citrus can get turned around and we can, you know, grow more acres and continue to see the product do well in the citrus market. But we've had good success with it. Just the convenience and the efficacy is something that people like. Any questions? No? All right. Well, I'll be here for lunch and if anybody wants to talk further, we can talk then. Thank you, Ramdas.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the sponsorship.
If you are interested about CEUs, send me an email and we will see you next time.